My micro campers. This is the most simplest and probably one of the best things that you can do is in order to save space, instead of just randomly dropping everything in your vehicle, you should get a bucket and then place your items in the bucket. So try to get as much stuff and what another thing I like to do is you like to try to put things in a certain organization. So we have all our cooking supplies, everything that we're using for that. We have our lighters, we have an axe, we have our stove. Because you gotta remember, depending on where you're at, we have fire restrictions out here in Arizona, and so a lot of times when you go camping, you cannot have a fire, and so the only thing you can do is you can use propane stoves, which I highly recommend that you have, and you bring that with you, and then you don't have to worry about that. But I always bring tools in order to cook on the fire because it always tastes better on the fire. So that is probably one of the number one camping suggestions that I would give to you. And then we'll take a look at some other things here in just a moment. Okay, so here's also some other suggestions that I recommend to people. So these are like special like wool blankets that you can use for if it's really cold. Um, they're kind of itchy, but they're really good for keeping you warm. Another thing that I recommend is when you're in your tent is get blow up mattresses. That makes a world of difference in just sleeping on your sleeping bag and then grabbing your sleeping bag. Now the reason why we're taking a look at this stuff right here is simple. When we go to pack our vehicle, instead of leaving this stuff like this, you see how much room it takes? Actually take the sleeping bags out and then place the items on top of them. So lay them flat out and you'll save tons of space and room in your vehicle. So I have only a small RAV, and the RAV I have is not a 4x4. It's just a 4-cylinder. So we have to be very careful about how much weight we put on it in order to get to where we want to go. But we still go to nice places and we can still get around. So that's just another suggestion for micro camping. And then another thing is, so we have obviously huge ice chests, and sometimes that is not the best option when you have little vehicles. So I have my, when we're going camping and we have other vehicles, we can have two ice chests, but we have a smaller ice chest, which is nice. And so I'm just going to kind of describe to you guys what we do with the ice chest in order to try to maximize the amount of room that we can use. So we'll use the big ice chest because it's there, and we'll just kind of take a look at it. So we're going to do an experiment. So we got this that we paid for, and we're going to be putting like the cheese, things you don't want to get wet inside of there. But my recommendation is we put our drinks in a section. So for example, for the adults, I have alcohol on that side, and I have on this side, we're going to have just normal drinks. And then in the middle, I'm going to put our meat. Okay. And we always make stew or whatever beforehand or steaks and refreeze them. Okay. And we also freeze our drinking water. So we take a few things of drinking water, our bacon, all our meats are frozen. So what does that do? So then we're going to take that, we're going to put our meats on the bottom here, and we always double bag them. So we use our gallon baggies is what I recommend, and I always double bag it because you don't want the meat when it dries or when it defrosts, excuse me. We don't want that to leak into the other stuff. We want it to stay good, and we want to be able to use our ice. The other thing that I do is, so I put our drinks, I stack them on the bottom, I put the meat here on the bottom, and then I put a layer of ice on. But what I do with the bags of ice is I usually take these bags, and I actually take our bags, and I put bags of ice in baggies. And the reason I do that is if I do get a leak and we get, chicken or raw meat or anything leaks, you absolutely got to be careful about that getting onto, the lids of your drinks or anything else, which could, give you E. coli. So that's why I'm double bagging it. But just to make it a little bit better, I'm putting the ice in there, because if you want to use ice, you don't want contamination in your ice. So that's just another thing. So you don't have to do that, but it will make the ice actually last longer. And then and I put in, like I said, I'm putting it into sections. You're putting your beer here, I'm putting my meat here, and then I'm putting our normal drinks in this kind of section here, and then I'm icing it up, and then I'm putting layers with, whatever else I'm putting in here. So my big meat's there, putting layers, then more drinks, then ice. And then for this cooler, because I'm going to be using this, I'm going to fill it only about to here with stuff so that I have enough space where those items are going to be okay without us having to worry about not being able to close the lid. So that's just a couple little things that we can do in order to maximize the amount of ice that we're using and the amount of space, because we have very little space. And I mean, how I told you I'm doing, I could do that with a smaller cooler. And that's just a suggestion for packing your cooler and some simple tricks. So remember, what is it? We're using baggies in order to put our ice into it, to keep the ice clean so we can use the ice for our drinks. And that we're organizing so we know exactly where our stuff is. And the reason we're doing that is when I open up the cooler, I don't want to be digging around trying to find my drinks or what I want. I want to know exactly where it's at so I can get into the cooler, I can grab what I need and pull it out with very little time. Because the more time that you're, especially when you're out there in the forest and there's nothing you can do, there's no getting more ice. You want to limit the amount of cold coming out of this as much as possible. So that's just a couple suggestions on some little camping trips or little techniques we can use. And we'll go through some more of that later. I hope this little camping series is going to do well. And if anyone watches this, I'm going to really appreciate it. And if you have any suggestions, please share it with us, because the more ideas and the more tricks out there, the better. Thank you.